Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Sachs from the Chai Center. Welcome to the Chai Center, and welcome to the adult education arm of the Chai Center. And it is called the Chai Academy. I see I look a little crooked here, so still look crooked. Um, we we're on a couple of times a day generally, just trying to study together as and slowly but surely we will also, in addition to having virtual classes, we'll also start bringing the live classes back, albeit safely, of course, and Zoom and Facebook Live. So we've been discussing the past few classes, 5 or 6 classes, the concept of Teshuva, Maimonides' take on repentance, and how Maimonides tells us, teaches us about how we have to, if somebody reproofs you, you should take it, and you shouldn't get angry at the person, because when somebody reproofs you, it's rather than arrogance, it should inspire sincerity, etc. Maimonides has been going through diligently the various things that really need to repent for. We repent for everything, but he's detailing. Today's class, which by the way is self-encapsulated class, it is not. You don't have to see other classes for this. All our classes are pretty much self-contained, but today's class in particular is discusses free will. A very powerful subject in itself, free will. Hey, Eileen. So that's today's class. When we think of free will, by the way, do we think of a friend who's an attorney? They're offering you to draft up a free will. Please realize nothing's free. Or there was a movie, Free Willy. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about Maimonides' take on free will. Does a human being have free will or not? In other words, does God dictate in some fashion somebody's actions? And it's a fascinating discussion. It's a class in itself, and that's probably, so it will be some, in addition to Maimonides, there will be some other wisdom from other sources thrown in. So Maimonides begins. It is, free will is granted to everybody. If a person wants to be good, they can be good. If a person wants to choose the path of not good, evil, wicked, person may choose to do so, right? And the Torah says it a couple times. But if you look in Bereshit, in Genesis, in the very beginning, it says, "Behold, man has become unique, as we are, knowing good and evil." Right? So the human species, as opposed to every other creation, including animals, including smart animals, including angels, the human being is unique to the fact that we have free will. That man operates on his or her own initiative, right? With their knowledge, with their thoughts, knowing good from evil. There's no one who can prevent you from doing good, and there's no one who can prevent you from doing bad. So a person should never, says Maimonides, should never entertain the thought, or the thought held by others, the thesis held by others, that the Holy One at the time of birth decrees whether you be righteous or wicked. And Maimonides completely rejects that notion. Completely rejects that. So while it is true you can be inculcated by virtue of living in a house, whether your house is this or house is that, and if the house is brings you up morally, that's great. If the house brings you up immorally, that's terrible. It doesn't negate your free will. It may make things a little bit harder, but you have the free will, right? Let's take L. Ron Hubbard, right? A guy who's he was a leader of a cult, etc. And the cult was it basically exposed that he's just a money guy and Dianetics, um, and and he was evil, and he was bringing people to the brink of poverty because of his salesmanship. He was evangelical something or other. I'm not even going to say Christian. I don't know what he was, but Dianetics. His son, who was brought up L. Ron Hubbard Jr., completely rejected his father's machinations, and he said, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. says, "I'm going to fight against evil like this." So a person can never say, "I was brought up this way." Doesn't have to be the case. A person, you're brought up a certain way, and with negative thoughts. It's true you may need therapy, and it's true you may need to work on yourself, but one can always remove the negative shackles that one has been placed from childhood. You can, right? Just because somebody was sexually abused, for example, that person does not have to become an abuser. So they have proof that it seems like they're gonna. The bottom line is you don't have to become the abuser. So it's we should be very clear. So Maimonides completely rejects the fact that God created wicked people and good people, etc. Rather, Maimonides says each person can be as saintly as Moses, and each person can be as wicked as Yeravam ben Nevat, who we discussed a couple days ago. A person could be wise or foolish. We're not talking about IQ here. We're talking about decisions. A person could be merciful, a person could be cruel, a person could be miserly, a person could be generous. That's all left up to you. It's all left up to your free will. There's no coercion from above. There's no, right? There's nobody, person cannot say, well, you led me to this. Rather, each person is in charge of their own destiny, and they can choose a path. And since it is this case, since it is so, that everybody can choose their own path, therefore a sinner is blamed for their own sins, and a person who's righteous is rewarded for their own good deeds. Now, there are some exceptions to the rule. If somebody was brought up, for example, and doesn't know anything about Torah, doesn't know anything about mezuzah, doesn't know anything about tefillin, nothing about kosher, so you're not going to say, well, you didn't keep kosher. No one's going to blame you for that. That was out of your hands. And then so if you're brought up a certain way, so it's no one's going to say, okay, well, it's once that you've done bad. No, it was completely ignorant, and therefore, when you attain some knowledge, you strive to be the best person you can, etc. And therefore, Maimonides says a person should be remorseful over their sins, should be jubilant over their good deeds, because it's really up to you. And since it's and he says, but Dovazeh, and this thing about the concept that nobody coerces you, nobody forces your hand to do good or bad, to do great things or bad things. He says it's Ikar Gadol, it's a fundamental concept. And there is actually a verse in the Torah in Deuteronomy that says that Re'eh, behold, I have given you today, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. And then the verse says, choose life. It's up to us to choose. It's up to us to choose. We're masters. We're masters of our own destiny. And Maimonides continues with this philosophy, and he answers a fundamental question. Just before we do that, we have to once again, because this is a class on free will. Free will, we're taught in moral decisions, things that are good and things that are bad. Free will is not whether you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream. Free will would be whether you like kosher chocolate ice cream, if you're Jewish, or unkosher chocolate ice cream with beef gelatin, if you're not Jewish. If you're Jewish, so that's a non-Jew doesn't have that choice really. A Jew is obligated to keep kosher. A non-Jew can keep kosher. So it's not, if you're Jewish, you have that choice. Kosher is the choice. If you're not Jewish, you have other choices. You have choice to, you have your own. A non-Jew has there's 7 Noahide laws, which split into 60 something of things you should do and shouldn't do, and you have complete free will. But once again, free will is only in moral decisions. It's not part of a pre-programmed chip. Where you live is a moral decision. Right? Which car you buy could also be a moral decision. Is it ostentatious or is it regular? Right? No one says you have to buy jalopy, but is it ostentatious? Is it is it the best Tesla out on the market, and then 2 months later you buy the next Tesla? That's possibly a moral decision. You're showing off. But not everything is a moral decision, right? If you buy a purple tie versus a green tie, that's not a moral choice. And Maimonides continues. Maimonides says, were God to decree that this individual is going to be born righteous, or this individual is going to be wicked, or you're going to be drawn to this or drawn to that. And he says that, and there are people who believe that. He says, but they're fools. And the reason why they're fools is because if you are, for whatever reason, right, that you believe that, oh no, that from the beginning of my creation I had it in me to be wicked, or I have this natural tendency to be wicked, he says it can't be so. Because if it is so, how can God decree that you should not do wicked things and you must do good things? If you have it in you, if it's part of your DNA to do good, right, then and not do evil, then how could you get rewarded? If it's part of you that there's no way you can do good and you only do evil, then how could God decree, right? How could there be reward and punishment for that matter? If it was strictly that you have pre your the way your mind works, the way your body's designed is you're going to be evil. Right? It's not the case. It's not the case. It's possible to be born where you have you're more of a hot-tempered individual. That doesn't mean you have to act on it. It's possible that you're born that you don't have a tendency to get attracted by a pretty woman, for example, and therefore it's easier for you not to have lewd thought, right? It's true, but you can always go against your nature, right? Because if God decrees from birth how you're going to be, then there's no way He can dictate to you at the same time how you shouldn't be, and there's no way He can punish or reward you. That's the idea. Right? So now, this is a question that comes up all the time. And Maimonides answers it in 2 ways. Right? He says a person should not wonder. Right? So he's preempting this question. How is it possible for a person to do whatever he wants and be responsible for his own deeds? Is it possible for anything to happen in this world without God's permission? So if God is the overseeing God and God sees nothing, God knows all, and God, right? How that clearly this bad I'm doing is in accord with God's wishes. So how can you say there is really free will if God knows everything you're going to do? And furthermore, if God doesn't want you to do it, you're not going to do it, right? So Maimonides, so it's essentially it's a little bit of a contradiction, right? It's a little bit of a contradiction. And if God knows everything, and God basically is in charge of everything, and God orders everything, and you can't go against God. So therefore, it's not free will. God gives you permission to do it. So Maimonides reconciles the contradiction as follows, and this is his first answer. He says, just as the Creator desired that the tendency of fire is to rise upwards, right? The tendency of water to flow downwards. Earth, when you throw it, it goes down. Wind goes down and goes up, right? God, just as God made the heavenly spheres revolve in a circular orbit, right? And everything else in nature follow some of God's, right? God ordered that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? He says that the trees grow upwards, not downwards, and certain trees are skinnier. Right? This is all God's wishes when He set nature into motion. He said, so He also decreed that man have free will. So yes, while granted, God knows what you're going to do. However, God said, my knowledge should not affect this person's decision down there. I know what He's going to do. But the human being in the physical world, standing in the middle of a moral dilemma, right? There's the crossroads right here. And the human being says, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And then the human being makes a choice. The choice alone is the human being's. That's how God set it up. So God could have set it up that you can't do anything. You cannot do anything to against God, and anything that's antithetical to God's wishes. But no, God set it just like He set everything else. Just like the moon shines at night and the sun shines during the day, so too the free will is there, and there's no force on you whatsoever. You're not being pulled, you're not being pushed, you're not being schlepped, but rather this is the way God set it up, that it's your own initiative completely. Therefore, a person can be judged, right, commensurate with their deeds, right? Does good, the person is treated with beneficence. If he does bad, he's treated harshly, right? So, and Maimonides continues. He says, but I still have a question. So, the bottom line is yeah, choices do have consequences, of course. Of course, that's what we need to teach our kids, right? So Maimonides asks, since the Holy One, since the Holy One, blessed be He, knows everything, does He not know whether you're going to be righteous or wicked? So here we just discussed that God set it up that way that you can have free will, but doesn't God know? Doesn't God know? And if God knows that if He knows that we'll be righteous, it's seemingly impossible for Him not to be righteous. And if God knows that He's going to be wicked, it's seemingly impossible that He's not going to be wicked. And if you say the person could do anything, then it seems like God's knowledge is incomplete. Right? So which is essentially the same question, and it has a similar answer. God set it up this way. The other answer Maimonides gives is that God's knowledge and our knowledge are light years. There's no comparison. There's not even light years. Light years would make it a comparison. Light years would say, okay, so it's millions of light years away. There's no comparison. There's no comparison whatsoever. God's knowledge of how God knows things and the way a human being knows things are not in the same galaxy, right? God, human beings, and we discussed this in Maimonides weeks ago, human beings have a knowledge Um, right? The human being, their knowledge is it could be external of themselves, right? So you have knowledge and you have self, and it's two separate things, and therefore a smart person could do something stupid because the knowledge is it's a compound, right? The more you learn, the more knowledge you get, and so you have this piece of Play-Doh called the brain, and then you teach the brain the Civil War, just compounded the Civil War onto the brain. You teach the brain about Martin Luther King. You just added now to the brain. You teach the brain about George Washington and Lincoln and Franklin and the Constitution, etc. Now that's added. Little Torah added. Mishnah added. Maimonides added. It's a compound. That's how we operate. God and God's knowledge are one thing. They're one entity. They're not separate. So therefore, did Maimonides ever sleep? No. Maimonides, we can talk about it. Maimonides had a hard life in that respect. Very little sleep. So the idea is that how can we understand God's knowledge? For us to say, well, if God knows, then a person does it, then God's knowledge is incomplete. We can't even say that because we don't know what we're talking about. We're not comparing apples to apples. Our knowledge and God's knowledge are not different types of apples. It's not even different types of fruit. It's not even different types of we don't even share the same space, right? We don't share the same air, right? It's completely different. So therefore, we cannot say that God's knowledge is incomplete. What we do know is that God's knowledge does not affect our decision down here. God knows what we're going to do, absolutely. Does he know our struggles? Absolutely. Does he know how it's going to end, how our struggle is going to end? Yes. Does that affect our decision down here? No. So the bottom line is you get you paid in the grocery store and the cashier gives you extra change, and you're now look at the change and you're counting and he said, oh man, I gave him a 10. He must have thought I gave him a 20. And he says, so I got $14.70. I got $1.70 more than I should have, or whatever. At that very point, you have free will. Do you give the money back, the $13 back, or do you walk away? At that moment in time, you have free will. That's the way God set it up. Right? I use that example specifically about a cashier because that's a moral choice. Do you give back? Is it stealing? It's stealing. Stealing is a moral choice. But once again, ice cream's not a moral choice. Whether you like brown shoes or black shoes, it's not a moral choice. Right? It's just not. How you decorate your house and whether you prefer, this color or that color, it's not a moral choice. It's part of a pre-programmed chip that you have in you that gives you a tendency for chocolate ice cream, brown shoes, right? But if it's a moral choice, then you have free will. Where you buy a house is a moral choice. Where you send your kids is a moral choice to school. Where you continue to send your kids, right? In other words, you think about it. According to the 5th Chabad Rebbe, you got to think about it every day. You know what? Yesterday was okay. How was today? Right? Whether you choose to keep your kids in the same school is a moral choice. Whether you choose to take them out because you don't like what you see is a moral choice. Whether you throw a brick through a window because you're upset of what a cop did in a different state is a moral choice. Right? So that is all moral choices, and you have to. A human being is judged on their choice. It's interesting to note they're not judged on their thoughts. right? They're not judged on their thoughts, um, right? They're only judged if they have a thought and then they act on it, right? There are a couple places you judge on your thoughts. If you if you think lewd thoughts, if you think of a naked body, so that is considered inappropriate thought, the hardest thing to control. Um, but you're only judged ultimately, except for a couple of examples. You only judge if you acted. So you could have all these thoughts that you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. When it comes to it, you don't. It's nothing. It's nothing. Yeah, I'm going to eat on Yom Kippur. I'm going to eat on Yom Kippur. I don't care. I don't give a rat's behind. I'm going to eat on Yom Kippur. And you don't eat on Yom Kippur, so you thought it. Big deal. It's not, right? We live in the world of action, so action is where it's at. Action is what we're judged on. So, so improper thoughts. If a person thinks about idol worship, so I don't know if you're punished, but it's considered very immoral. It's considered that it taints the soul to think about these things, and by the way, because we spoke about lewd thoughts earlier, because lewd thoughts you are punished. That is why you have to be very careful what you look at, right? Because so you can say, well, a lot of things I can look at. I can look at a McDonald's. Me personally, right? I could look at a McDonald's menu from here to tomorrow. I am not going to think about or even come close to touching even a French fry, right? But what about if I see something that's lewd, right? It will poison my mind, poison my soul, and I'll think about it, and then I can be punished for it. So the idea is that's why it says in the third paragraph of the Shema, heed your eyes, watch what your eyes see. Right, take care that you don't right. It's only for the positive, not for the negative. I think the question is, how about lusting in your heart like Jimmy Carter? So I think Jimmy Carter, that wasn't the worst thing he did, right? That wasn't his worst sin, I believe, with Jimmy Carter. What he only did to the Jewish people and to the pride of Israel, and I think that's the biggest sin. But yeah, lust in your heart. So look, if a person has lust in their heart and acts upon it, you cheat on your spouse, or you if you're not married, you still go sleeping around, or you go to this place or that place, this house of ill repute. Then it is action is a lot worse than thinking. Yeah, and that is, absolutely. Hasidim try to remain, it's not disdain for women. No, not at all. Not at all. Hasidim try not to look at women because, and one could argue that, come on, man, this woman's fully dressed. This woman is having a transaction. She's buying orange juice and eggs and a package of cheese. Stop. But they're very, very sensitive. Right, they don't have a TV, so they don't see all this nonsense. They've never seen, and they don't see movies. I mean, some of them do, but a lot of them. So and I speak for myself as well, we become somewhat desensitized, right? So, when we watch a movie and it's, that was a movie, but somebody who's never seen a movie, or somebody who's just very, very proper and very modest, they're very pure and they're ultra sensitive. So it's not disdain. It's just that they're very, they're very naive. And while it's true, you could say, men, come on, keep yourself in check, cool it, and that's true. And I think that's true. But they are super sensitive because they never see it. They never see it. So it's nothing to do with you're not Jewish enough, or you are Jewish enough. Satmar has their issue with in general, and they've come a long way. By the way, they've come a long way. Satmar does have the issue that they're very insular, as opposed to Chabad is not insular. But it's more to do. They don't want to look you in the eye. They don't want to. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was different. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, when you went to him, spoke to him, he looked you in the eye. He spoke to you, and he, that was his thing. Something very special about him is that he did not shy away. So yeah, has nothing to do with disdain. It's just they really keep themselves in check. But you can go to a bar in Manhattan and you can see Hasidim there, Samras, others, whatever. You can see those are the wild ones. Those are the ones that they choose to go and see topless bar or whatever. They choose to do it. But most of them are very, very pure and all this. And as far as making love through a hole in the sheet, it really doesn't happen. These men are. I know you saw the movie. It's called Unorthodox. They're husbands and wives in the confines of their own bedroom. Many of them, some of them don't, I'm sure, but many of them have very, very, very satisfying sex lives. And they may not, go completely crazy, but they do satisfy each other. And so they're not as archaic and as stuffy as they seem, for sure not. The bottom line is we do have free will. Choose wisely. You want to be a vegetarian, Eileen? That's your choice, but I don't know if it's a moral choice. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. God bless to all, and have a great, great New Year. May Hashem bless us all with everything that we need, everything that we feel is important, and may obstacles be really, really small ones, really small obstacles, and may God heal all our pain, suffering, mental anxiety, woes, and issues. God bless.